Hello, this is Sadashiv Fadnis, Product Marketing Manager for Rubidium signal generators here at Anritsu. In this video, I'll be explaining various trigger mechanisms available in Rubidium's pulse train option. If you would like to learn more about Rubidium's pulse train option itself, please look at video titled Generating Pulse Train, option 25, published previously. Wide variety of trigger mechanisms available in Rubidium's pulse train option enable users to generate long periodic and non-periodic pulse patterns. Such pulse patterns are very useful for many measurement applications, including testing radar warning receivers. This video has 4 parts. Part 1 explains the setup and the free running trigger mode. The second part explains single step and single sweep trigger modes. Part 3 explains breakpoint and multiple sweep trigger modes. Part 4, the concluding part, explains various trigger sources and how to combine them with trigger modes to generate periodic and non-periodic pulse patterns. So let's look at another trigger mechanism. I think we are currently looking at free running, but let's choose another one. So before we choose the trigger mode, we turn off the pulse train modulation, go back, and then let's look at single step. So that's the trigger mode we will look at next. And in terms of trigger source, we'll leave it at single, which essentially uses internal clock to do the triggering. Okay, so this is the single step. Now we'll go back and switch on the pulse modulation again. And with single step, when we go back to the trigger mechanism again, when you choose single step, each time you click on this control, which is called trigger sweep, it will trigger one burst at a time. So just to make it clear, let's go to the list again and see we have defined 3 bursts, right? So each time you click on this trigger sweep, one of these bursts will get triggered, and we will take a look at each one after triggering. So let's trigger it once. So we triggered it once. So the first burst, which is this with 50% duty cycle and 3, it should be seen on the spectrum analyzer. We should be able to see that, and this is the first burst, right? And then let's go back to the trigger mode and let's trigger again one more step, right? Now this should output the second burst 11 times, those narrow pulses 11 times. So let's look at that. Those are narrow pulses 11 times. Now go back to trigger again and trigger again. Now we should be able to see the third burst. This is the third burst, 100 microseconds high and very low, very narrow low period, 3 times. So if you go back here, that's what you see, right? So essentially the single step trigger mode, it outputs each burst one at a time as you trigger it using this control. That's the single step mode. Now let's look at it dynamically. I'm going to trigger. That's your first burst, that's your second burst, and that's your third burst. On and on and on you could do that, right? Now this is, you can trigger this manually the single step you can trigger manually, but you can also trigger using external gate. um, and currently I'm using internal clock, so let's stick with single. So again, this is the last burst, this is the first burst, this is the second burst, this is the last burst. So this is what the single step triggering mode is. So the next trigger mechanism we will look at is single sweep. We have been looking at single step, so next take a look at single sweep. So before I do that, let me go switch off the modulation. We'll come back and enable it. So we have chosen single sweep. We are going to stay with single as trigger source, and then we will go back and enable the modulation again, the pulse train modulation again. So let's look at what this single sweep does, and if we go back to all the bursts that we have defined, what single sweep does is every time you click on trigger sweep, the single sweep triggers all 3 bursts at a time and then stop. It'll output the first burst 3 times, the second one 11 times, and the third one 3 times, and then it will stop. So if when compared to the single step, in the case of single step, it was outputting 1 burst at a time, but in this single sweep it will output all 3 bursts at a time. So let's take a look at that. So we have set single sweep, and source is the same. So let's trigger, and you see it's outputting the entire all 3 bursts at a time, right? Versus if you chose single step, then it would output only 1 burst at a time, and if you chose single sweep, then it would output all 3 bursts at a time and then stop.